Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where every story sheds light on the complex nature of human connections. Today, we bring you an unexpected tale of a millionaire, a homeless woman, and a wedding invitation that leads to something none of them could have predicted. Stay with us as we explore the power of kindness, second chances, and the unexpected bonds that change lives. In the heart of Chicago, Andrew Carter was a man who seemed to have it all. A successful architect, he had built a firm from the ground up, and his name had become synonymous with luxury and innovation. He was respected in his field, and his career was on a steady rise. Yet, despite the glass towers he designed and the wealth he had accumulated, there was a weight on his shoulders that no amount of success could lift. The source of that weight was simple: his family, specifically his daughter, Lily. Lily was the one bright spot in Andrew's otherwise demanding life. A 7-year-old with an infectious laugh and a bright spirit. She was the reason he worked so hard. But the harder he worked, the more distant their relationship became. Since his divorce from Sarah, his ex-wife, Andrew had thrown himself into his firm, often working long hours. It was his way of coping with the loss of his marriage. But in doing so, he found himself neglecting the very thing that mattered most: his daughter. As he stood in his sleek kitchen one cold morning, making toast and spreading jam, Andrew couldn't help but feel the weight of the decisions he had made. He knew Lily needed more of his time, but there was always something pressing, always a deadline, a meeting, or a new project that demanded his attention. "Evelyn, sweetheart, it's time to get up. We got a big day ahead. Come on. We can't be late for school," he said, trying to be firm but gentle as he called up to his daughter's room. Lily's sleepy face appeared at the top of the stairs moments later. Her hair was messy, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Dad, just 5 more minutes, please. And I don't want cereal for breakfast. And I really don't want to go to your office after school. It's boring." Andrew smiled faintly, trying to ignore the pang of guilt that hit him. It wasn't that he didn't love spending time with her. It was just that there was always something more urgent. "No cereal today. Kiddo, I made toast with your favorite jam," he replied. "And as for the office, Diane, my secretary, will pick you up after school. You know you're too young to stay home alone. And the babysitter is still sick." He could see the disappointment in her eyes. She hated the office, hated how it felt like she was always an afterthought, even though Andrew did his best to make her feel loved. But no matter how many promises he made, he knew the truth: his work came first, and Lily was often the one who paid the price. After breakfast, Andrew drove Lily to school, listening to her stories from the morning. The car was filled with the sound of her excited chatter. But even as she spoke, Andrew found himself distracted by thoughts of the day ahead. New projects to pitch, meetings with clients, deadlines to meet. Later that afternoon, as he sat in his office, staring at blueprints for a new skyscraper, his phone buzzed. It was Lily. "Dad, can I call Mom? I miss her. I want to go over there after school." Andrew's heart ached when he heard the familiar sadness in her voice. He knew she missed her mother, but Sarah had always been too busy to spend quality time with her. "You can call her, sweetheart, but I'm not sure she'll have time today. She's always so busy," Andrew replied softly. Lily's disappointment was evident even through the phone. "Okay, Dad, I'll try later." Andrew sighed, wishing he could give her more than just empty promises. He couldn't help but feel responsible for the emotional distance between them. If only he didn't have to spend so much time at the office. If only he could find a way to balance his career and his family. But for now, he did what he could. He promised to pick her up after school, and they would go out for ice cream. Later, when Lily arrived at the office, her face brightened when she saw him. "Dad, I don't want to sit in your office again," she grumbled. "It's so boring." Andrew smiled, trying to mask the guilt he felt. "How about we go get a big ice cream after we finish here?" Her eyes lit up, and for a brief moment, Andrew felt like he was doing something right. As they ate ice cream together, Lily told him about her day at school, and Andrew listened intently, trying to push aside the thoughts of contracts and meetings that loomed in his mind. But when they returned to the office, he found her curled up on the couch, asleep under a blanket. As he sat at his desk, the weight of his past decisions pressed down on him. He knew he was failing as a father. He had grown up in a fractured family himself. And now, it seemed, he was repeating the same mistakes with Lily. The thought gnawed at him. Was he really giving her the life she deserved? As the evening wore on, Andrew realized that despite all his achievements, he couldn't ignore the fact that the one thing he had neglected, the one thing that truly mattered, was the very thing he loved most, his daughter. The days slipped by in a blur for Andrew. Meetings, deadlines, and endless negotiations took up the majority of his time, leaving little room for anything else. At night, as he sat alone in his high-rise apartment, the city lights casting long shadows across his polished floors, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing touch with the one person who mattered most, Lily. The divorce had been difficult, not just for Andrew, but for Lily as well. Sarah, his ex-wife, was busy with her own career, and though they had agreed on a shared custody arrangement, Lily often seemed caught in the middle. It wasn't that Sarah didn't love their daughter, but her attention was always divided, and Andrew could see how it affected Lily. One particularly difficult afternoon, as Andrew wrapped up a series of meetings and prepared to head home, Diane, his secretary, arrived with Lily in tow. She was slouched in a chair in the corner of the office, a textbook open in front of her, but her eyes kept darting toward the door, clearly waiting for her mother's call. "Hey, Dad," Lily said softly, the hint of disappointment in her voice. "Can I call Mom and see if we can go over to her place after school?" Andrew's heart sank. He knew what was coming. He had seen it before, the hope in Lily's eyes that quickly faded when Sarah couldn't find the time. "Of course, sweetheart. You can call her," Andrew said, forcing a smile. "But you know she's probably busy with work. I'm not sure she'll have time for you today." Lily nodded but didn't speak, her face falling. She picked up her phone and dialed Sarah's number, the faint buzz of the line filling the silence of the office. After a moment, she spoke softly into the phone. "Hi, Mom. I thought maybe we could go for ice cream, or I could come over. I miss you." Andrew could hear the sadness in Lily's voice even from across the room. The phone call was brief. Sarah's response was typical. "Not today. Honey, I'm really busy. Maybe on the weekend." "Okay." Lily's face fell, and Andrew's heart broke for her. She didn't say anything, just slowly lowered the phone and stared out the window. Her small shoulders slumped in defeat. Seeing her like this made Andrew question his own choices. He worked long hours to provide for Lily. But was it enough? Was it really? He was giving her everything except the one thing she truly needed: time, attention, and love that wasn't wrapped in the guise of material comforts. Andrew walked over and sat beside her, placing a hand on her small shoulder. "Hey, kiddo, you know what? How about we go out and get some ice cream? Your favorite, 3 scoops with chocolate syrup and sprinkles." Lily's face lit up immediately, and for the first time that day, a small smile crept across her lips. "Really, Dad?" "Of course," he replied, squeezing her shoulder gently. "It's not too late for ice cream, is it?" Together, they walked out of the office and into the crisp evening air. The streets of Chicago were alive with the buzz of traffic, the distant hum of a city that never slept. They made their way to the little ice cream shop around the corner, a place they had visited many times, back when life was simpler and their world hadn't been so fractured. As they sat together, the large ice cream sundae between them, Lily began to talk again about school, about her friends, about her favorite TV shows. Andrew listened with a quiet attentiveness, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. For a moment, he was reminded of the things that truly mattered. He smiled as she eagerly took another spoonful of her sundae, her eyes sparkling as she shared her stories. But even as they laughed together, Andrew couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was missing. They had this moment, this small, perfect moment. But what about the rest of the time? Was it enough? Was he enough? Later that evening, after they returned home, Lily worked on her homework while Andrew attended another conference call. When he returned to the living room, the scene before him struck him with a sudden wave of guilt. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up under a blanket. The homework was left unfinished. a pencil still gripped loosely in her small hand. He sat down beside her and brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. In that moment, Andrew was reminded of how fleeting time was. Lily was growing up too fast, and the more he tried to control the world around him, the more he lost control over the one thing that truly mattered. He stared out the window, his mind swirling with thoughts of his ex-wife, his work, and the choices he had made. The ache in his chest grew deeper. The walls of his apartment, the ones that had once felt like a symbol of his success, now felt cold and empty. The ice cream shop was one of their special places, a small, cozy spot with pastel-colored walls and a counter lined with every imaginable topping. As they walked in, the familiar jingle of the bell above the door made Lily's face light up. Her eyes twinkled, and she immediately started talking about her day at school, who she sat next to, what they'd learned in science, and the funny thing one of her friends had said during lunch. Andrew listened, but for the first time in what felt like forever. He wasn't distracted. He was present. Lily had a way of drawing him back from the constant swirl of stress and pressure that surrounded him at work. When their ice cream arrived, Lily eagerly took a spoonful, savoring the sweetness. She smiled up at him, and for a moment, everything felt right. It felt like how it used to be, before the divorce, before everything had changed. They sat together in comfortable silence, enjoying their treat. But Andrew couldn't help but feel the bittersweet pang of time slipping by. "I miss Mom," Lily said quietly after a while, breaking the silence. Andrew looked at his daughter, the weight of her words hanging in the air between them. He knew she missed Sarah, and in a way, he missed the woman he'd once married. But the pain of their separation was something he couldn't fix with ice cream or promises. It was something that needed time, something that both of them had to learn to navigate. "I know, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I know you miss her, but you're not alone, okay? You've got me, and I'm always here for you." She nodded. Though her eyes seemed far away, Andrew could see the sadness in them, the ache of a child who had to grow up too quickly. That evening, as they returned to the office, Andrew couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more. More for Lily, more for himself. He had to find a way to balance his work and his responsibilities as a father. He couldn't let his daughter grow up feeling neglected. But how? Back at the office, as the clock ticked toward midnight, Andrew sat at his desk, his head buried in the details of his latest project. The phone rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was Sarah. "Hello," he answered, trying to mask his exhaustion. "Andrew." Sarah's voice was tight, her words measured. "I need to talk to you about something. Can we meet tomorrow? I think it's time we discuss Lily and everything else." Andrew felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't sure what this conversation would bring, but he knew it was coming. The cracks in his marriage, the fractures in their family, had never fully healed. And now, it seemed, there was something more they needed to address. "I'll meet you tomorrow," Andrew said, trying to steady his breath. "Let's talk." The next day, they met at a small cafe near the office. The air was crisp, and the cafe was nearly empty, save for a few patrons sipping coffee and talking quietly. Sarah was already seated when Andrew arrived, her eyes tired but determined. They exchanged small talk before the real conversation began. Sarah looked down at her hands, then back up at Andrew. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she began, "about what we've both done, about Lily. I think we need to make some changes." Andrew nodded, his heart racing. "I agree. I haven't been there enough for her. I know that. I think we both need to be more present in her life," Sarah said, her voice softer now. "We both need to stop putting our own lives ahead of hers." The conversation went on, the weight of the past settling between them. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. They both acknowledged the pain they'd caused, the mistakes they'd made, and the way forward for Lily. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would be more conversations to have, more adjustments to make, but it was a start. That evening, as Andrew sat on his couch, the city lights twinkling outside his window, he felt a sense of clarity. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't overwhelmed by the weight of his career or the fractured parts of his life. He had taken the first step toward healing, not just for him, but for Lily, too. The next morning, Lily woke up to find Andrew in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. "What's this?" she asked, eyes wide with surprise. "Something different," Andrew said with a grin. "No more rushing through the mornings. We got time today." As they sat together, enjoying their meal, Andrew knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, he felt hopeful. Hopeful that he could be the father Lily needed. And hopeful that, together, they could rebuild what had been lost. And maybe, just maybe, they could begin to find a new kind of family, one built not just on shared time, but on understanding, love, and the courage to change. Thank you for watching today's touching story. We hope it inspired you to reflect on the kindness that exists in the world, even in the most unlikely places. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe to the Empathy Stories channel for more heartwarming tales that remind us of the beauty of human connection.